What's up, guys? I'm Cameron.
And I'm Rain.
This is episode 3 of our Encounters podcast. Today we have a very special and very attractive guest. My wife, Sera.
Hi.
So we just
And
kind of,
Elijah.
yeah, I can't forget him.
I know. I can't forget the baby.
Little man's passed out through fire alarms and everything in this place.
Oh,
Literally.
crazy start so far.
So thanks for being with us.
Thanks for
And,
having me.
I mean, I guess to start out, we'll just let you open with maybe like a short snippet of your testimony, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay, cool. So, been in the Christian world, I guess, pretty much all my life. Kind of would say I grew up in church, like half and half. Always went to church with my great grandmother from like a young age. Like I remember she was Pentecostal though, so it was always like really. Any of my Pentecostal peeps know what I'm about to be talking about. But I remember like my earliest memory of church was like being 5 or 6 years old and like stuff happening in the Pentecostal church and like somebody like fell out in the spirit, like was totally slain in the spirit, and they put like a blanket over her, and I literally would look at my grandma and be like, are they dead? And so from a young age, that's just kind of what my experience with church was. And so my family, like themselves, we weren't like super involved in church. Like my parents just kind of, didn't have the healthiest marriage growing up. And so we weren't always in church. And so, but I remember specifically there was this encounter I had with God. I was in 8th grade and my mom forced me to go to a D now. And if you don't know what that is, that's like a discipleship now kind of it's like in here in East Texas, it's like a weekend where you like stay at a youth leader's house and you go to like this big like weekend conference for youth kids. And so my mom forced me to go because we just started going to this church. And I'm like, I know nobody in this youth group. I don't want to go spend the weekend like with people I don't know at a youth leader's house I don't know. And so, but she forced me to go. And I remember like it was a second night in, and just something in the room shifted for me. And all I remember was being in tears. And I went up to this youth leader I had only known for a day and was like, I think I want to ask Jesus into my heart. And, being a kid that grew up in church, like I'd known about God, but I never had made that decision for myself. And so it was a big life-changing moment for me. Like I just remember crying and feeling the Holy Spirit so tangibly. And so I accepted Christ in 8th grade. But it wasn't smooth sailing then. I had like a lot of rockiness throughout life and really didn't start taking Christ seriously again until like I was a senior in high school and had like the whole world in front of me. And so I was like, oh, I better like cling to something right now, and it needs to be something that's actually like tangible that's gonna hold me steady. And so, um, started taking Christ seriously again my senior year of high school and been following him faithfully ever since.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Uh, yeah, I know. I mean, I didn't grow up Pentecostal, but I remember the first time seeing something like that and not really understanding it and knowing it. It's kind of scary. And I'm
Mhm.
sure a lot of people can relate to that. But
Oh, yeah, imagine being, like, a young kid and seeing all these women, like, laying hands on you and speaking in tongues.
yeah.
I literally just remember looking up and being like, "I don't know what's going on. This is scary."
And at the time, like I was younger too when I first saw that. And I guess I didn't really, know what a cult was. But like that's why why people think that some churches are cults because they're just uneducated on that type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something.
Because inner Pentecostal started coming out this last Sunday on. No, was it 2 Sundays ago?
Yeah, last Sunday, 2 Sundays.
Yeah, 2 Sundays ago. Which if you haven't already watched, go to YouTube, check out Revive Church on there, and you can check that out. So I guess we'll kind of want to pick your brain. So 8th grade, you said that's where you accepted God. You didn't start taking it serious until your senior year. What do you think made I mean that's what, like a 4-year stretch?
Yeah.
What what made you not take your walk with God serious before your senior year?
I just didn't I don't think I knew how to. Like, I really didn't have like, we were in and out of church so much, like, or we would go from church to church. Like, I never had true discipleship, or I never, and my parents, I love them so much, but they did the best they could under the circumstances. I was a child born before they were married. They were, late teenagers when they had me. So they were still kids themselves. And so they didn't know how to, really raise a kid. They had the supportive family around them, but they didn't really know how to be good, like, I don't wanna say good godly examples because it makes them sound horrible, but they didn't know how to be, like, godly examples because they were still trying to figure out how to be that themselves, and so I didn't have that, and so, at a young age, I was exposed to some things, like, I was exposed to pornography at a very young age. It was honestly too young, which is kinda where my passion for, working with children comes from, but, around early elementary, I was exposed to that from a neighbor, and so I struggled already with pornography and, like, lust and stuff like that way too young, and so when I accepted Christ in 8th grade, it was like I still had that stuff in the back seat, and I didn't know really what freedom was. I didn't know, like, how to truly let that go, how to walk in a Christian lifestyle. I just knew, like, I should be reading my Bible and, lifting my hands during worship and, Jesus said, "Do it, sure." Like, you know what I mean? And so that stuff I just carried with and struggle with, and, as you enter high school, it's like a whole new world. It's like you're exposed to so many different things, you're wanting to be cool and popular, you're wanting to do all the sports and all the, like, the extracurricular stuff.
Yeah.
You're, finding love possibly for the first time. I remember some of the guys I dated in high school were completely no, no, no. But it's just you're just finding yourself, and so trying to find myself while carrying all this baggage and stuff, like, it just it just distanced me from God, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. I didn't know how to break myself free of it, so I guess that's really why I spent so long saying I was a Christian, but not really living life like a Christian, and so when senior year came around and I really kept encountering God in ways, like daily, like how we talk here at church, like I realized, oh my gosh, I've got to like acknowledge it's a problem and learn to let it go so I can continue to pursue God daily and righteousness and holiness and purification. And so, yeah, that's kind of really when it stuck for me is like, oh, this is how I can let some of that stuff go. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought it was not funny from your your testimony part, but you mentioned high school and, like, trying to be cool and all that. It brought back I remember when I was in high school and, people would find out, like, I went to church and stuff, and they'd be like, "Oh, like, you go to church? Like, you're a Christian?" I'm like, "Yeah, but, like, I'm not one of those people, like, I'm not crazy Chris I'm not that crazy Christian or whatever," like, like and I mean, I said that for years.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, that's like for a lot of us, you don't want to be associated with that when you're trying to be cool or you're
Yeah.
trying to fit in, just because of the way people view Christianity these days. And I mean, a majority say, they're hypocrites and all this sort of stuff. But even like just if you're a high school kid who doesn't go to church, you just think, oh, you're just trying to be a goody goody good boy. And yeah, you don't want to be that. You don't.
Yeah.
That's not what you want to be. But that's complete opposite of what actually is going on. But yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I bet you do as a PK.
Yeah, yeah, being a pastor's kid, when people tell it's funny, when I tell people I'm a pastor's kid, not everybody, but a lot of people will immediately start acting different around me, and I'm like, "Bro,
Oh.
like, come on, like, I'm still the same guy,
Mhm.
like, you don't have to." Like, people who, cuss regularly, they'll figure that I'm like, "Oh," and then they'll start cussing me like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't." I'm like, "Bro, like, I mean, you shouldn't cuss, but, like, it's like you don't have to change your behavior just because of someone
Yeah.
because of who my dad is," and I don't know, but it
Did
is
you
fun.
find too that, like, when people at church, like, would, like, in your youth group realize you were a PK, like, they instantly wanted to be closer to you? Like,
I mean, yeah, and that's weird too. Like, people know me in the church as the pastor's kid, and if I wasn't the pastor's kid, I don't think I would get as much, I don't know what to call it other than attention. I
yeah.
know it sounds weird, but, like, people come up to me and talk to me just because they know who I am, and that's weird. I mean, I don't, take it in a bad way, or I don't know. I feel like I handle it pretty well. I mean, I've been doing it for 10 years now. But but yeah, it is weird. It's strange just how because of you're somebody's son, how they treat you differently. And not necessarily in a bad way all the time, but yeah.
All right. Well, one question off of what you were saying, you said you struggled with pornography. Obviously, I know that in the world today, I mean that's what's shown in the world is like your identity. It's like your dad has preached on that before, the world has gotten to the point where you introduce yourself to people or you meet people and you're like, "Oh, my name's so and so. I'm bisexual," or you that's how you characterize yourself, and it becomes that's who you are,
Yeah.
and that's what you want everyone to know about you. And so I think in the world today, especially, and with technology, and the multiple devices, and especially nowadays, I mean, you see 3, 4-year-olds walking around with iPads and everything else
Yeah.
with protection on them, but there's always loopholes.
Yeah.
So with that addiction, I kind of got 2 questions.
Yeah.
Um, First question is how do you think that addiction held you from reaching your true potential as a daughter of Christ?
Oof. Well, it just kept me like part of me, whether I, knew it or not, like something in my spirit always said, this is wrong. Because it was always like when it was introduced to me, it was like a little secret of like, it was very late at night when it happened and everything. And so it was like always like they don't need to see this. Like this is a little secret. So it's like the shame with it came of like if anybody ever found out, like I watched this, there was always like people would think I'm, was weird, like, but it was always like, oh, my parents are gonna be so mad at me, like if they found out I watched this. And so that became a part of my days. Like I lived in kind of like a shame, like in guilt. But I was so young, my brain was just like still trying to form. I couldn't figure out like why truly it was bad and then why like how I should let it go. And so I lived in that shame. And also it affected the way like I viewed love because pornography, whether, you want to believe it or not, it's a really sick and twisted way. Satan has twisted what God has deemed as perfect love, of how, sex is beautiful within a marriage. Satan has twisted it in such a way to where it's, this I don't even know. It's in some ways it's really abusive in the pornography industry and everything. And so it just affected the way I viewed love. And that honestly impacted my relationships with, guys I dated in high school, like it just I can't honestly explain it. And people who have gone through a pornography addiction know what I mean. It's just it distorts the way you view love. And honestly, the way it had me was I was in such a vulnerable place. I would just if they said jump, I said how high. I just didn't know what a real love looked like. And so that honestly, as a young teenage girl, affects like, you're already insecure, and so it always already affected that. And so I was just really kind of lost. I was very lost in seeking love in wrong places, wrong ways, and that addiction to pornography just distorted it even more. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's good. The second part of my that question that I had is how with what will or power and how do you think you were able to finally get over that addiction? Um, because I know I struggled with that addiction as well, and it's not easy. And personally, even me asking you this question, like I don't even really know how to answer that question because it's one of those things like you're like, well, in really any addiction, you're like, I'm done, whatever. And then 13 seconds later, you walk into the next room and you're like, or am I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and so, like, what, I mean, like, what helped you finally, like, realize, like, "Okay, this needs to be done, like, I need to move past this addiction?"
So it was when I was in college when like throughout high school or like my senior year of high school, I had, kind of realized, oh, this is like something, like I said, I need to let go of. But it wasn't really till I was in college and I was getting out of a really toxic relationship. And I was like, this is a thing that is holding me back. Like, I felt like I was already struggling with anxiety and depression in college, and I was like, "I seriously like, I'm tired of living this way." It's like, you just get to the point, you're just like, "Okay, I'm done. Like, I can't keep doing this anymore because it's tearing me apart physically and emotionally and mentally." And so I finally just got to that point and I started honestly like looking up how to get over like where are we because I still like I had just walked away from a church like God had asked me to walk away from a church that was connected to that toxic relationship, so I was like, well, crud, I have again no discipleship, nowhere to go for this. And so I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go straight to Google. And I found, like, pastors and, sermons or, like, little devotionals and such that gave practical tips because that's what I needed was practicality. I didn't need, like, this big, long drawn out, like, "May the power of Christ compel you, I'm set free," kind of a thing. But I just needed practical steps, and it's the practicality of, okay, I need accountability on my phone. Like I need to either delete like, whatever outlet I was going to for, to find that kind of a thing or whenever I got lonely, like that's where I was going to. I needed to reach out to people when I got lonely and, was starting to have that temptation. I didn't necessarily tell people like, "Hey, I'm struggling, like, I feel like I'm about to go watch porn," or it was just like, "Hey, I'm not feeling the greatest right now. Like, can I come over and talk to you? Can you, talk to me?" And then it was just watching what was in the world around me, like, that I was consuming, because the crazy thing about our world is, porn is, like, deemed as this horrible thing, but yet our world hypersexualizes so much. Like, you can't watch, like, a TV show nowadays without there being, like, an intimate scene between 2 people, or there being, like, something going on that could tempt you in that way.
Yeah.
And so I had to, like, watch what I was consuming, even if it meant, like, not having television at all. Like, I remember when I first moved in my very first apartment, like, I literally only had what was, like, available through YouTube, and that was it. And so I'd find myself watching, like, TV game shows that were, like, reruns on YouTube, but I had to watch what I was consuming, and sometimes that meant social media too. Like, I had to block myself from, seeing certain things on social media or undownloading certain apps because I knew it was gonna tempt me,
Yeah.
and even still, like, when we were first dating, I remember I talked to you about, just the fact of, like, our relationship alone sometimes felt like a temptation just because I love you and we knew we were supposed to be together. And, obviously, when two people know they're supposed to be together, the world makes it so easy to sit there and say, hey, just go ahead and move on to the next step. Go ahead and move in together. Go ahead. And
Yeah.
without even getting married. And so, it was just kind of figuring out what my temptations were, what my triggers were, and just practically taking steps to overcome those things, and so
Yeah. I think there's so much that we consume that is a false example of what love is, like you were saying. And it's just everywhere. That's just what, and if you're not a Christian, that's just what you think is normal and how it should go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's so rare, like, on TV. Like, I can't remember, it was a show we were watching where it was, like, almost this big plot point that the couple like, the girl or the guy, I can't remember which, didn't wanna live with the person until they were married or didn't wanna, like, wanted to stay absent until they were married. I'm like, "When did that become a plot point of something we were engaged in rather than that's the normal of that's how we're supposed to live our lives and handle
Yeah.
relationships."
yeah, well, you made the comment, you said, like, in the world today or something along those lines, you said, "porn is seen as a bad thing." Honestly, like, I don't think that's how it is nowadays. Like, I think, honestly, like, it's turned into one of those things kind of like how like, referencing your sexuality. that used to never be a thing. And now that's a huge focus.
Yeah.
Used to, you wanted to hide if you had that addiction or that if you had watched porn before. Now I feel like honestly it's one of those things that's become so normal. You're honestly probably found to be more weird if you don't watch it.
Really?
Like, I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
like I was scrolling through Facebook and there's reels and stuff, and it was actually another podcast, which ours is better, of course. Anyways, um, and it was literally a group of like probably young 20, and they like literally the whole premise of the video was like asking each other like what kind they like to watch the most.
Really?
And this was like a
Wow.
podcast, like, I mean, that was gonna be heard and viewed by like who knows how many people.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's probably gone viral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what the world has come to, unfortunately. And so that's when I think if you ask the average Joe out on the streets, they'd probably honestly not be ashamed to say,
Well, when you think of, introducing yourself and having your whole identity placed in being bisexual or gay or straight, you're placing your identity in your sexual preference. Like that just it doesn't make sense to me. Like like as a straight person, I have never in my life, when I'm meeting someone or even telling somebody about myself, mentioned that I'm straight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you see how ridiculous that sounds, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
Like even if you are gay, like I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, and I'm not trying to say it's all right either. I'm just saying, why is that bro, he's dying over here.
Well,
I could just imagine me going, I'm Rain Pickard, I'm straight.
Exactly, bro.
well, and like here's the thing. What's the crazy thing is I have, people I know in my life who claim, they identify as, gay or bisexual, any of that. And it's like it's so weird. It's because they don't outright say it like that. It's, in our culture, there's people who advocate for that so much harder than the people who truly identify as, you know what I'm saying? I feel like there's two types of people. There's the people who are advocating so hard for it. And then there's just people that live that way, that live their, normal, that live life like that. Not to say that it's like normal or it's, even okay, but they don't sit there and go around like, friends that I have, they don't sit there and be like, "Well, I'm so and so, I'm bisexual." It's really the people who take it to a certain extreme,
That's true.
and
Yeah.
there's such a difference, and I feel like it's the same way, like, in what we consume, like, with the intimacy and the sexualization of stuff, like, people understand, like, if you see a married couple on TV, like, they understand, like, that's more than likely what they're gonna do, even if it's like a couple that lives together in television. They understand that's gonna what they do probably. Why do we have to show it? Why do we even have to, not even in its full extent, but why do we even have to show things that like, oh, this is what it's leading to or anything? Like people automatically understand that. And so
I think it probably has to go hand in hand with what you were saying, how it's more accepted in today's society, pornography. And I think TV sees that and understands that that's getting views and that's what people are watching.
Yeah.
So let's include as much of that as we legally can into our show because that's what people feed off of.
Well, and I think it's so weird for us, not saying we're like holier than now, but we do know the truth about this stuff. We follow God, we pursue him on a daily basis, and so we know that that's not how things should be. But a lot of these people that live that way, unfortunately, they still have that curtain in front of their eyes that the enemy's placed there. And so to them in their um mind, that's normal.
Yeah.
It's not abnormal. It's not weird. That's just their normal, like, hey, this is how things are.
yeah.
Um, but kind of get past and move over this little cliff of porn and sexuality and all that. Um, I know you were talking to me the other day, kind of wanting to know a little bit more about like, you know, our testimony together about
Yeah.
Elijah and everything. So
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had any specific questions or if you just kind of wanted to.
Yeah. Well, no, we can launch into that. I'm just curious. I know y'all have told me, but how old were y'all when y'all like first met? I know everything moved quickly for y'all.
Oh gosh.
I'm gonna let her answer it because I answer
Let
everything.
me think. So it was 2019 when we met. So you were 19.
Yeah.
I was about to turn 21, and we met. And honestly, how we met, it's a testimony for me. Like, I don't know how much it is for him, but it's like I had gone through years, like I said, toxic and really bad relationships, and I had like finally like said no, no more. And I was going to stay single as long as God allowed me to. And you know, God, after 2 years, brought me him, and he was like the biggest answered prayer, biggest testimony through a hard time of singleness. But his sister-in-law is the one who actually set us up. I actually worked at a boutique here in East Texas, and she used to come and shop with me and everything. And she's like, I got this really cute brother-in-law that you should go out with sometime. And I was like hardcore into like, no, I'm not dating anybody. So I was like, no, thank you. And it was 6 months later, 6 or 7 months later, he DM'd me on Instagram.
Yeah.
He slid into my DMs when it was like, I think sliding into DMs was still kind of new at the time. It was like kind of seen as weird at the time. Like, it's so normal now. Just like slide up on somebody's story, let them know how cute they are. But it was still kind of seen as like, okay. But it was a really cute
For sure.
message.
Hey, I always tell people, I'm like, look, she wasn't didn't know she was interested till she got to look at me. This she realized she was real, and then she's that's great.
But yeah, no, we went on a date, and literally after what, 3 months of knowing each other, dating kinda in a sense, we got engaged. And then
Yeah, that timeline I screwed up on our
I was gonna
that
say,
website go to. So
she said 2 weeks.
That's why I'm like,
That
I'm just gonna let her answer the question as the
I literally told him after I saw him this like 2 weeks after we met, I was like, "You're gonna make us seem like those people at a Christian college." And it's like, how like the stereotype is like, "Oh, we go to a Christian college after 1 week of knowing each other, we should already be married, like, having babies and everything." I was like, "You're gonna make us seem like weird."
Yeah, get yourself in trouble.
yep, I did. So she answered it.
Just to clarify, it was 2 weeks after we started dating, he bought a ring, which I know doesn't help anymore, but that's what I was about.
But we still started dating. What, like you said, how long after knowing each other? 3 months.
Well, we got engaged, yeah, we started dating in, at the end of August, and got engaged early December.
It's crazy.
Dude, it was
That is
insane.
wild.
No, I'm saying, no, you gotta just.
I'm surprised my parents let you.
Uh,
I'm very surprised my dad said yes to let you
Smart.
propose.
me too, but
So, okay, what was the question?
So what was the official age? 1921?
Yeah.
1921. Cool, man.
yeah,
We were just
she
babies.
robbed the cradle. Saying.
Dude, if you could insert pictures, you should insert a picture of young Cam and I, because he looks at completely different.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
If you love me, you will not do that.
Hey, I'm the editor. We'll see.
Oh,
We'll crack this open real quick.
Celsius sponsor us.
Sponsor us. So, and obviously y'all answer with whatever y'all are comfortable with. But the new member of the family right here is, I mean, I would say one of the biggest testimonies in y'all's life.
Yeah.
Um, when uh, when did y'all decide originally when y'all wanted to have children?
I knew you were gonna ask that. And I was thinking in my mind. It was like within like 6 months of our wedding.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got married in March of 21, and I had already gotten you remember I had already gotten baby fever like weeks after we got married. I was like literally like, "You want to have a baby? You want to start trying for a baby?" But we didn't officially like decide to like. I was on birth control and everything, so we didn't decide to get off of that until October of that same year. And
Seems like forever ago. I didn't know.
I know it's insane. And so yeah, we pretty quickly we decided we wanted to have kids and have a family. I mean, we knew from the get go. Like, we were that couple that was like kind of cringy. Like, but when we first started dating, we would sit there and plan out like what our kids' names are gonna be and like how many we were gonna have.
Yeah.
And so, but we knew we just always wanted a family.
Yeah.
So
And so, I mean, obviously I know, but the whole process and time of y'all wanting to have children, you just kind of talk about at the very beginning what happened and what went on, and And if y'all aren't comfortable with sharing everything, then don't. But
No, I mean,
Yeah, I'm sure she'll share whatever everything about it. Honestly, I don't really care.
yeah.
Knows, but I mean,
So, like I said, I'm gonna let her answer
yeah,
all the questions so that she gets it right.
Well, so like you said, we officially made the decision to try in October. And so obviously we just started trying. And, when you first try to start getting pregnant, they tell you it'll take up to a year just because, it's just something your body has to get used to, kind of a thing of like, trying to make a kid. Because despite,
Well, and also she was on birth control,
yeah, I was on birth.
so we had sure to stop taking
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just not as easy because it's not easy for everybody. So they say up to a year. And so we started trying in October of 21, and in March of 22, we found out we were pregnant, and we were like, "Oh, that's awesome. Like, this is great, Rick." We were so excited, and we were like, "We're not going to tell anybody. Like, we're going to let it be a surprise. We want to find out, what do we want to find out the gender or like get to our first sonogram? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I know
I
we were
just know we
keeping it
didn't tell
secret.
anyone.
Yeah, we were just trying to keep it secret because we knew, like, in every pregnancy, there's a chance of miscarriage. Like, within the first 12 weeks is, anywhere between that time. They say after 12 weeks, you're usually pretty in the safe zone and everything because that's when the gender's established, kind of a thing. So,
Right.
but we were just like, we're just gonna wait to tell people, but we were really excited.
So I wouldn't say we were waiting for the gender
You think? Yeah.
Because I think at that time we weren't like it maybe in the back of our head we had like thoughts of like possible miscarriage, but like I don't think that was like one of our main I think at that time we were waiting for the gender. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
That's why we didn't tell anyone.
Yeah. So we kept on to the secret. I found out like at I was like a month along or whatever. And so we went along and we had our first doctor's appointment at like 10 weeks, I think is what it was. And like I hadn't had no signs or anything. Like everything felt normal. And we went in for our first doctor's appointment, and the lady like gets the ultrasound, and she was like, "Oh, there's the baby." And we were so excited, like, yay. And she's like, "All right, let me get the heartbeat and everything." And it was like dead silent in the room for a couple minutes. And like we didn't know what to expect. We just didn't think anything of it. We're just like, oh, okay, it's just, taking a little longer. Maybe something's messing up on the machine. But we were just so excited. We're like, oh, there's our baby. And, out of nowhere, she goes, I can't seem to find the heartbeat. And like immediately my heart dropped. And I knew in that moment something was wrong. And she was like, "It's okay. Maybe it's just because like, the baby's still so small and everything." She was like, "I wouldn't think anything of it, but something in my spirit, like, something's not right."
Mm.
And
Well, and also because she said it was only measuring like 6 weeks along.
yeah, and I was supposed to be, like, somewhere around 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I just found out really early." Like, we didn't know how this worked at all. And so, he was trying to be really encouraging. I just left bawling after the appointment, but he was like, "It's okay, maybe it's just, like, really early to this or that." And the couple of days later, my doctor calls and he was like, "Yeah, you've miscarried. You lost the baby." And I was at work, and, deep down, I had faith, and I was like, maybe God, can just turn all this around. Maybe it's just like she said, it's just too soon. I found out way too early. But something in my spirit deep down said, we had lost the baby. And so, um, finally, after a couple days, I kind of just grappled with the terms, and my body started actively miscarrying, which, you know, as guys, and I understand, but like for anybody else, it's like you go through like a normal birth process. Like I can say now, like having him, like and having my miscarriage, it was so similar because your body passes whatever it had of the baby. So, kind of anatomy, like once the egg and the sperm kind of, do its thing, it has to attach to your uterine wall. And to have a miscarriage, that has to detach, pass through your body and exit it. And then the placenta, which is what helps keep the baby alive, has to go with it. So I remember it was like very, very vividly. It was like a Friday. I just come home from work. I was already, hurting and cramping and everything, and knew I was miscarrying. But I remember that feeling of passing both the baby and my placenta, and him just holding me while I cried,
Mm.
and just knowing that like our baby was gone.
Wow.
And that was just kind of the moment that it sunk in, and began this really long, hard process. And I gotta give props to you. I've given you props before personally, but just publicly have to always you were such an amazing support during that time. Like you didn't know how to handle any of this either. Like yet you continued to support me through honestly the worst depression bout I've ever had. And so love you for that. Thank you. You're a great husband for that.
Well, yeah.
And
That's fine.
and that was a hard point for our marriage too, because
I was gonna say, because
we were battling grief in both different ways.
It was-
So weird.
and that's like one of those things that like you literally do not know like what to say.
Well, yeah.
Like you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do to help. And it's like you don't know any of that until like you just experience it. And honestly, now looking back, we actually thank God for not allowing us to have a baby at that time, because that was within our first year. And we look back now and we're like, no wonder God didn't allow us to have a baby, because we were nowhere near where we needed to be as far as like connected to each other.
Connected to God.
Yeah, connected to God. We weren't doing what we needed to do. And so we're like, no wonder, because our relationship was nowhere near where it needed to be
Yeah.
for him to want to steward that and give us.
Yeah.
Because, and then if you add a child in the mix, when your marriage isn't okay, all the focus is going to be on the baby.
And it's already crumbling marriage. And
And add stress, of course.
Yeah.
And then, now you're adding pressure on an already unstable marriage.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through it a lot just in the last 3 months, and I felt like we had a very stable relationship when we
Yeah.
had him. And so, like I said, looking back now, we're like, man, like no wonder like that happened. Yes, it's unfortunate. Yes, it's still sad.
God didn't cause it. Like
Yeah.
I know a lot of like women struggle with who, have had several miscarriages. Like they struggle with God causes. Like God doesn't cause, like the Bible clearly says like God is the author of good, and he, does good and perfect things. But God definitely used used the miscarriage to like allow us to see, oh crud, if we really want a baby, if we really want a family, like we need to get right with one another. We need to get right with God. Like you need to work through some things. And so
Yeah.
it really just opened our eyes. But not gonna lie, it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Nothing is worse than mourning a child you never got to meet. Because, people can debate, discuss, or whatever. No matter at what stage of life, a baby's a baby. And to imagine what could have been another child like him, I never got to see, anything past like a little bean, and so never got to see arms, legs, like, and so it was just really hard mourning a child we never, like, that was the first time we saw him, like, on the sonogram. And
Yeah.
so
And that's why when you go through different seasons of life, good and bad, it's important to try and look at it from an outside perspective and say, what is God trying to do in my life by putting me through this? And she can give you exact timelines. But, after that point, it was a little while, but then we started trying again. And over the next, 2 years? Next 2 years, we dealt with infertility, and she can give me more detail, but that's what also helped strengthen our relationship, and we were able to get more involved in church. And both of us were able to see God on a personal level. And so because of that event, we were both able to get where we need to be with God, or at least closer to where we needed to be with God, closer to each other. And so, like I said, that's why it's important to be like, man, like this situation sucks. Like, why are you doing this to me, God? Like, take a step back and say, what is he trying to teach me? Because, and I'm a full firm believer, if he keeps putting you through trials, they're for a reason. And if you don't find the reason and learn from it, you're gonna keep going through trials. They may not be as extreme as a miscarriage or anything else, but I mean, that's just, yeah.
Well, and that's wild to hear y'all say, both of y'all, like the stance that you guys have looking back on that. Like you literally just said, like, you're thankful that that happened. You're thankful that God put y'all through that. And that is just insane to hear just from an outside perspective. Like you said, that's the hardest thing you've ever gone through.
Yeah.
But you're thankful for it.
Mhm.
Like that's a reason why some people go away from God and stray away from God. And y'all, you took a step back and looked at, okay, we're going to use this to get closer to God.
Well, and
And
honestly, it didn't start out like that. We had great godly people in our lives, like mentors who helped us see that perspective. Because when you're in the dark tunnel, you can't see that there's light on the outside, but you have to have people who are on the outside telling you, hey, it's just a season. Like God's got you through this. And I think it was actually your mom who helped me really shift my focus and perspective on when we go through trials and when we go through hard seasons, it's actually a beautiful place to be because it reminds us that we really need to rely on God. Because it's like, David, so many times in the Bible, he was destined for greatness. He was destined to be king of Israel and went through such trials. I mean, had to run for years from Saul, run from the place that he was essentially destined to be king of. And in those seasons, in that time, he wrote Psalms. Like he wrote about him crying out to God and needing God. And I just think, trials are horrible and hard and can be difficult to walk through, but it ultimately humbles us and reminds us, hey, we can't be too self-reliant. Like we need God. We need to be able to lean on him as our strength. And
yeah,
so,
when I know that y'all did that, y'all were strong during that season. I'm sure probably not every second you weren't strong.
yeah.
I'm sure you didn't feel strong, but I think if I'm thinking about it right, I think that's when I got closest to y'all
Hmm.
was during that time. Because I don't know when I found out that this had happened with you guys, but I remember hearing that and being like, I had no idea, and y'all were such. Um, that was just a time in my life where y'all were getting involved, and I was looking up to you guys and kind of leaning on you guys as like a godly influence, and then finding that out that y'all had been going through that, I was like, wow, like I had no idea, and y'all still poured yourself out into me, and y'all were getting involved in youth group, and I don't know, I just want to thank y'all for that because if y'all had handled that situation differently, I may not have a relationship with you guys today, and it's just crazy to see everything that God can do from something like this.
Yeah. I mean, there were plenty of moments we wanted to give up. I mean, even past that moment, so from that moment on, we were like, okay, after, I had recovered and we felt, in a good headspace and everything, we decided, okay, we're just going to try again and keep trying. And there, were so many times, like every single month, we're like, I don't understand. Why are we not getting pregnant? And, I finally switched doctors and to the doctor that we had now that actually delivered him. And I was like, we don't understand what's going on. And he was like, okay, we're just going to run some tests. And in the end, they couldn't really find anything major wrong. Like, most of the times when people go through that stuff, it's always like, oh, like it's definitely the husband. Like, there's something wrong with him, or it's definitely the wife. She can't, blah, blah, blah. But like my doctor looked at me and were like, it could be this with him. It could be this with you.
Yeah.
And we couldn't find anything wrong. And that was such like a frustrating and discouraging part of the journey. And that's when they officially diagnosed me as having infertility. And I was like, I remember the day I saw that on my doctor's report and I called you and I was like, that was the one thing I didn't want to see on the papers is infertility because it felt like a red letter almost of like, it's official.
Yeah.
You can't have kids because
Yeah.
Well,
it's what.
so I think all those times because I remember what she's talking about, and I think all those times now looking back, obviously that was God, like you're saying, the trials. He wanted us to rely on Him. He didn't want us to rely on the test
Yeah.
because it truly was. They're like, okay, well, let's do this, and if that's the issue, then we'll know, and we can do this about it. Nope, that looks okay. So then they want to do some tests on me. They want to do some tests on me, and so we did. No, I mean it could, but no, most likely that wasn't the reason. Oh well, let's try this test, and if this is it, then we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z to fix it. No, that was okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And so it's like every test, like we're like, then what the heck is going on?
And this is all meanwhile too, like we're still grieving from the
Right.
process, like because grief just doesn't happen and then end. Like grief is a thing over time, like it comes in waves. Like, and like had our what would have been our child's first birthday at the time, and so it's like we're going through all these things of unknowns, and
Yeah, I
it was
can't
like,
imagine.
oh, the first birthday, oh crud, like this stinks, like kind of a thing. And I'm serious. There's so many moments we just wanted to give up, but we knew like we talked about all the time, God made us a promise and God doesn't fail. God doesn't, let his children down. And we had to cling to that so many times that he's not going to let us down, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in 10 years from now. God's going to give us our promise. And it just may not be what we look like,
Yeah.
should look like. And
Yeah.
so,
And ultimately, honestly, I can say like that's when we finally did get pregnant was whenever because she was on medicine, we were doing tests, all this stuff, and we were finally, not to the point of like, all right, we're done, like wherever we were actually scheduled, was it?
IUI.
Yeah, we were scheduled, we made an appointment for IUI, and it was like a month and a half out or whatever.
Because that's the next step. Like after they say medicine doesn't work, all the tests are fine. Like
Yeah.
they just schedule you for that next step because there's nothing else they could do now besides involve, the next science and somebody else coming in.
And at that point, we were like, well, if nothing we're doing now is helping and we have to do that next step, then there's no reason for her to take medicine. There's no reason for us to keep, tracking our ovulation. There's no reason to do any of this stuff. And then literally it was like, what, a week out from the appointment?
Yeah.
Something like that. And we found out she was pregnant.
Wow. So was there ever a moment? Yeah, how long? 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Was there ever a moment where y'all thought God didn't want y'all to have a child?
A lot.
Oh yeah, and we had to grapple with that fact of like even if God doesn't give us a child, like we're still going to faithfully serve him. We're going to still, choose to say we're disciples and we want to, live our lives for him. And then we had to say even if God didn't want us to have a child like naturally, like would we be okay with adoption? Like that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Were there alternative ways maybe God was wanting us to go, or was just God just didn't want us to have a child, period, and we were just meant to pour and minister into youth and kids because we were very active in youth group, ministering. Y'all became my kids. Like, y'all still call me Mama Sera sometimes. So y'all still call me Mama Sera and everything. And I had just taken over, our kids department here at the church. So I was just focused on, pouring and ministering into kids. That was our focus and main mindset. So we had to grapple with that idea of like, if God truly just said, no, it's not for us, like, would we still love him and serve him? And we made that choice and just said, yeah, we would. And I think that's a beautiful place. And ultimately, sometimes God gives us that when we truly gives us the desires of our heart, when he truly knows the desire won't overtake us when we get there.
Well, and that even goes back to last week or last episode when we had Brayley on. She said the same thing.
Yeah.
Remember whenever she was consumed in dating you and you were her whole life, she finally said the prayer, she's like, if I'm not even going to be with him anymore, like I'm fine with that. Like I just want to do what you want me to do. So I think obviously that's across the board. That's where we have to be on a daily basis. We need to be able to surrender ourselves to be a part of whatever God
Hey, the
wants.
Bible says God is a jealous God. I mean, he sent his only son to die for us. I mean, I love Elijah, but I mean, sacrificing him would be very hard. So the fact that he was jealous enough to send his own son,
Yeah.
Yeah. But just kind of in a nutshell, we found out we were pregnant, went through a pregnancy, not definitely ups and downs of that.
we had a lot of scares of like, we thought something was wrong, like we thought we were going to lose him or I was going to have to deliver early. And
Yeah. And what he was delivered 3 weeks early. And he already has testimony of his life. He spent the first 8 days of his life in the NICU. And he started out on CPAP and was on oxygen. But even though we were put in that situation where we kept telling each other, of course there was sadness and I bawled my eyes out whenever he had to go to the NICU. But we were still able to encourage each other, like, look, he brought us this far, like he's not gonna let us down now. He's not gonna fail us now. And even though he was in the NICU for 8 days, every single time, whether I went by myself to see him or we went together, every time we saw him, there was some sort of improvement.
sometimes even hours, like it was insane.
Whether they were able to decrease his oxygen or he was eating more or whatever it was, it progressed. And that just shows like, the enemy tried to take him out as soon as he was born.
Yeah.
But he has someone on the inside.
Oh yeah. Look at him now.
I know. So you've got already a huge prophetic word, I mean, over him that
Yeah.
is going to change the world. I mean, I know it's cliche, like, but if you know the prophetic word, you just had to be there. I mean, he's going to be just like, Elijah was in the Bible. I mean,
Amen.
so, I mean, the enemy was already going to try to take him out from the get-go, and the enemy always wants us to be discouraged. But I mean, there's this verse, and it just popped up on my Bible app today, and it's from the Good News Bible UK translation. I did not know there was a Good News Bible translation.
You have to say it in a British
I was just
accent.
about to say, you have to.
Well, who knew that they made different translations for different countries? Like, there's a UK like, what's so different about the UK translation to the American? I don't know. But I'm not reading it in a British accent. But I think this, like, I saw this and I was like, this pretty much summarizes like our journey and like, kind of where God carried us and everything. But it says, but his answer was, my grace is all you need, for my power is greatest when you are weak. I am most happy then to be proud of my weaknesses in order to feel the protection of Christ's power over me. And I mean, just the fact of like, I'm happy to be weak because then Christ's protection is over me. Like, that's just such a cool perspective.
That's awesome, but I mean, like I said, that's kind of a good overview of
Yeah, he's a living, breathing,
uh
like miracle.
Well, I remember
uh,
going. I mean, just seeing y'all go through the time of not being able to get pregnant and uh, praying over you guys and with you guys, and I'd get updates from you guys sometimes for your doctor's visit, and sometimes it'd be kind of good, and then other times it'd be bad, or just like so, like we don't know. And I just remember when you told me and Braylee that y'all were pregnant finally, like that was we were just so joyful for you guys because we had known all of this, what you just said you've gone through, and now the promise is finally being fulfilled, and it's in the way that you guys originally wanted it. It's not you didn't have to go and adopt, you didn't have to, settle. Not that,
yeah.
even if that was God's plan, then it would have been great, but still, that's just great to see. God never breaks his promises.
Yeah, and I really hope
Yeah,
that
amen.
yeah, I hope that encourages somebody too, because I know a lot of women personally, and any, even a man whose wife may be going through this too. Like, it's just there's purpose in the waiting. Like, God has a purpose for everything, and even if we have to wait 2 years, 10 years, I mean, look at Sarah and Abraham. Like, they were old as dirt, and God still gave them a child. And
Yeah.
so, like, just be encouraged by you didn't do anything wrong. It's just God has a specific purpose for that time in your life. And
Just because you're following God don't mean your life's gonna be all rainbows and
Exactly. Yep.
leprechauns.
leprechauns? Why leprechauns?
Isn't that the same?
Rainbows and butterflies?
Oh, rainbows. I don't know why I said
Leprechauns are at the bottom with the gold, so
Oh
What the
man.
heck?
Um.
That's why I
Well,
love you.
think we're come to a wrap. Thank you, Sarah, for being on.
Yes.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
being my wife and baby mama.
Oh, thanks for being my baby daddy. It's pretty dang handsome.
Did want to let you guys know next episode we're gonna have our pastor Shannon Pickard on. He's gonna give us a rundown of his short testimony of how the church came to be, but also he's gonna be answering some controversial questions in the Christian community. I don't know. Have you ever wondered if you can have a tattoo as a Christian or go out drinking? Is that all right? He'll be with us here next episode to find out. And so if you do have any controversial questions or just any gray areas that you want to know more about, comment below. That way we can ask them live on the podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe. But we appreciate you tuning in, and we hope to see you guys more. You want to close that out in prayer?
Sure, I can close this. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, I thank you for this day and for this time that we got to have with Sera and Cameron and Elijah telling their testimony. I'm just so thankful for what you've done through them and what you're continuing to do through them and for them and for all of us, Lord. And just thankful for the testimony and the promise that you kept for them with Elijah and his entire life, and for him being healthy and him being here today. We just thank you for that, and trust and know that you will continue to bless them in that. And I just pray that someone watching would have got something out of this, and it would have just pierced their hearts, and that we would continue to spread your word to who needs to hear it, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Peace out, guys.
Thank you.